Today we have Matthew Sullivan, CEO and founder of QuantmRE. How are you?
Very well, Gabby. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you so much for joining us, Matthew.
Thank you for having me on.
So first, tell us what QuantmRE is and even a little bit of the story of how you got to starting this particular business.
Well, we solve a major problem for homeowners. That's probably the best place to start. In other words, what do we do? And the problem that we solve is if you're a homeowner and you have equity in your home, the only way that you can unlock, go to the bank on bended knee and borrow money. So in other words, even though you've spent your entire life paying off your mortgage, you then find yourself in a position where you've got to go back into debt just to unlock some of the equity that you've built up. So our program, which is a home equity investment, enables people to unlock equity without having to borrow money, and they have up to 30 years to settle the agreement. And in the meantime, they get a cash lump sum with no monthly payments, no interest, and it doesn't appear on their credit report as added debt. So it's a fantastic way for people who either don't want to borrow money or cannot borrow money. It's a great way for them to be able to unlock potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars of their wealth that is locked up in their home equity today.
Wow. So it sounds definitely like kind of a loophole in a sense that you're able to find to really help your
Well,
clients.
no, yes. Do you know, the funny thing is that your response is very typical of the response that we get, which is,
Okay.
yeah, sounds like a loophole, sounds a bit too good to be true. I've got all this equity. So if you think about it, you've got a home and you might have, $300,000 or $400,000 of equity because your home has been appreciating year on year. And then you think, well, God, I'm, a quarter millionaire on paper, but I can't afford to put gas in the car. So, and how does that work? So you go to the bank and you say, well, how do I unlock this equity? And they say, well, let's have a look at your credit score and let's have a look at your income and your debt to income ratio. And you say, well, things have been really hard lately. And, I haven't had as much work. So my income's gone down. I've used all my credit cards. So my credit score has gone down as well. And so the bank says, I'm really sorry, we can't lend you any money. But your equity is still there. In other words, you've still got that, $250,000 worth of equity. So our investors say, well, actually, we don't want to be paid interest like the banks. We want to share in the potential appreciation of your home. So if your home goes up in value, we'll take a share of that. So in the meantime, don't worry about paying us interest because that's for the banks. We want to take a share of your home because we think if your home goes up in value, we'll do really well just by taking a share of that appreciation. So that way, it's a completely different way of unlocking equity. So it's a way that commercial real estate transactions have used for decades, because in a commercial real estate transaction, you've got all sorts of debt, you've got all sorts of other funding. But if you're a homeowner, you've only really got access to, debt. So you've only got access to one or two tools in the toolkit.
And so why do you think a lot more companies or other people haven't done this? I mean, it sounds like something
Well,
that's almost
it's
like
been around for 10
revolutionary.
years. It's like
Okay.
anything. And the
Right.
reason they haven't done it is frankly because it's that education issue. It's the same thing where you say, well, look, logically, you should be doing this. And people say, no, listen, I've been doing this the same way for the last 30 years. And you're coming on with this newfangled way of doing stuff. And it takes time to get people to understand how this works, why it's different, why it's entirely logical for investors to want to participate in the upside. So it's that education thing. It's the thing that, is the biggest challenge to the adoption of anything new, really.
Right. And so on top of the education, I'm sure just there's so many nitty gritty details. And like you said, this is something a little different. That can cause like your clients maybe to be a little overwhelmed or just not knowing, like, how do you bring them comfort to know like this is something that is a better option than what they've been doing in the past?
And it's funny, but you're absolutely right. That's the reactions that people have. First of all, they know that they've got a need. So in other words, and this need for the ability to unlock their capital can come from a number of different places. It can come from having too much debt on their credit cards, feeling underwater or overwhelmed because of the debt that they're carrying and thinking that there's no solution. And at the other end of the spectrum, we've got people who have tons of equity and think, well, why is all my money stuck in my house when every single financial advisor I speak to says I should diversify my portfolio? So I want to get out of the equity in my house and start buying some stocks and bonds. So different people have different sort of motivations, but the critical thing is being able to explain in very simple terms how it works, what the motivation is on both sides of the equation. So for a homeowner, the motivation is, well, I'm going to give up some of my equity in exchange for cash today. All right, that's fair enough. From the investor side, it's, well, if I give you cash today, can I have a share of some of your increase in investment or increase in value? Because I like your house. I don't want you to move out. I don't want you to be a renter. I want you to have the same motivation as a homeowner has, but that way, the house is much more likely to go up. So it's a great trade. But again, it's like anything really, isn't it? When you're one has to really just think about what the other person is thinking about, not just about, you can't just throw facts at them, and you've got to try and get them to understand why this actually works, because their natural inclination is that it's, as I said, it's new. So it's probably something that won't be around next week. But this type of program has been around for almost a decade, and pre-COVID, how many times have we heard that?
Right.
I think we, as an industry, we were on track for probably doing close to $1 billion. That's all the companies that are operating with these types of agreements. So it's not just us.
So then throughout the entire decade now, what would you say, besides the education factor and like I said, motivating the investors, what would you say would be the biggest challenges to get to where you are today?
Well, I think with anything new, you start off and you go, this is really interesting because it's new. And I think that's the thing that sort of really motivates a lot of us who sort of build businesses. It's the ability to carve a new path or to create something that's new. But it comes with all sorts of caveats and challenges. Things like, if you're too far advanced and too far ahead of your time, you're not going to get adoption. And you don't want to be the lone person with their head above the parapet saying, look, the sky is falling down. And everyone said, no, it's not. So you have to always balance the fact that you think this thing is absolutely fantastic, but it doesn't actually make any difference if no one else thinks that. So one always has to try and consider, normally with the counsel of others who are far smarter than oneself, this is what we're trying to do. Is there enough of a marketplace for it? Can we articulate it properly? Do we solve a problem? So those are all the challenges, but I'm not sure if I even answered any of your question there. Sorry. I was off on a rant, I think it's,
No, it's fine. I mean, I definitely like that makes sense as far as the different challenges. Cause that's what made me think of also, is it like a personality thing you think too, as far as balancing, like you said, you don't want to be too ahead of the curve where people aren't going to follow you and you're by yourself. But at the same time, you want to make sure that you are being a leader and like conscious business leader.
Yeah, you've got, the thing with all of this is, okay, so you have this great idea and then you test it, normally by using a sequence of words along the lines of, hey, Fred, I've got this idea. Do you think I'm completely certifiable, or do you think it's going to work? So Fred is obviously your sort of friend or your trusted advisor. So once you've got enough people saying, yeah, this will probably work, then you've got to test it in the marketplace. And there's a saying that no business plan survives first contact with a customer. So those are all the standard challenges. But then you've got the challenge of, look, okay, so now you're on this pathway. How do I make this work? How do I drive the business every day? And particularly with COVID, with the impact of that, where you haven't got the same group of people around you because everyone's sort of geographically separated. You've got to think, well, how do we push every button? How do we shake every tree? How do we think of every opportunity to try and get this message out? Because and the glorious thing about this is 3 years in, I still wake up every morning, and that's a bonus in its own right, just waking up every morning. But I wake up every morning and I still really love this, because I still think that there are people out there that need to know about this, who want to know about this, who are scratching their heads thinking, how am I, going to get out of this sort of situation, or what am I going to do with all of this money that's tied up in bricks and mortar? So a lot of it is to do with the belief and love that you have of what you do, which is probably, that's what makes you get up and start training at probably 4 o'clock every morning. I think every day is like, hey, guess what? Today's a new day, and I have to get up early and do all that stuff that hurts.
Yeah, and when you have the passion and love, it makes things easier too, even during the hard parts too. And I think it's trying to pass it on also to your clients, even the ones who may not know exactly what you offer.
It doesn't make it hurt less, though, does it?
No, not at all. So
It's funny enough. Years and years ago, we used to sponsor a fantastic, brilliant boxer called Chris Eubank, who was a British. I think he was a middleweight or heavyweight champion, but he was a superb boxer. And I remember going around to his home in Brighton, or in Hove, in England, and he was out training. And the thing is that, he was the fittest, strongest person you'd ever meet, but he'd say every day I go out and I start running every day, my knees hurt, my shoulders hurt, but he used to sort of drive through it. I just wanted to throw in the fact that I knew Chris Eubank.
The podcast is a perfect opportunity to do so.
There you are. So Chris, if you're there, it was I missed you terribly. It was great fun driving around Brighton in your Peterbilt truck. So, if you're listening, how are you? Yeah.
Perfect. Hello. So you talked about how you feel like there's a lot of people that still you want to pass this on to. You want people to understand it. So they're scratching.
Yeah, approximately 14.7 million people.
Right. Just approximately. Yeah. So then what is your vision for the next three to 4 years, as far as for QuantmRE?
I think really, the vision, you break it down into what can we achieve in the short term, the medium term, and what's the long-term objective. Okay, so we don't have specific long-term goals because I don't think you can, because otherwise, if you set long-term goals, all you're going to achieve is disappointment because, between now and then, the world has a habit of throwing curved balls. So we set sort of short-term objectives. In other words, those are revenue objectives. In other words, how do we grow our revenue to this point? That's achievable. And we then say, well, how do we then have, lower, middle, and upper targets of those? Okay. So that's the sort of the short-term objectives. You then have the sort of, the longer-term goals. And I can't remember who wrote the book, but there was a great expression which came out of Google, which was going for roof shots rather than moon shots. So we have this objective long-term of making home equity tradable, accessible to investors, easy for people who are homeowners to go online, click a few buttons, and then, unlock their equity. So that is a roof shot in the sense it's something where we can see the roof. We can probably, get the ball up there as long as we throw hard enough. So we do have a series of longer term objectives really to get these home equity agreements as a mass market offering that is the same way, thought of the same way that home equity lines of credit and mortgages and other loans. So this just becomes another mainstream product.
Yeah, and there's another norm. Absolutely. And so we talked about the future, but as far as the past so far, what would you say is your favorite client success story?
I think that each one that we do is great because each one is different. Every deal that we do has a story behind it. The ones that I like the most are the ones where, and at the moment, the stories are all about people getting out of debt using their equity. So using this cash pile that they've spent years building up, that's sort of locked in their bricks and mortar, finding a way. So the best one really is just stories where people have tried the banks, they've tried private lenders, they've tried credit card companies. Every time they do that, their credit score goes down and down. We come along and we say, we can help you. And naturally they are incredulous because everyone has turned them down. But the stories where we're raising $50,000 to $100,000 for someone from their home that they thought that they were going to lose, where we can repair their credit, enable them to get cash, get current, get comfortable, all of these feelings that they haven't felt for a long time.
Mm.
And what we're able to do is remove that sword that sort of hangs over their head every morning when they wake up thinking, how am I going to get out of this?
Right.
And it's a way which is, as we said at the beginning, it's a great way because it delivers a real long-term solution.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just a patch, which they're going to have to try and repair just a few months down the road.
Right. So you're really giving people like monumental relief in their life.
I think it is. And it is because the amount of money that we're talking about depends obviously on the home value, but
Mm-hmm.
it's tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars
Right.
where they do not have to make any payments. They don't have, the obligation is there, but they don't have to settle up for up to 30 years. And that's a long time for most of us on this planet to sort of consider. 30 years ago, I was slightly younger, and I think, the world was a different place for me then. So.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so amazing information. Thank you so much. What is the best way for people to learn more about QuantmRE and then just even contact you for more information?
Yeah, well, we have everything on our website. So it's QuantmRE.com.
Mm-hmm.
And we called it QuantmRE because our plan is to chop up these home equity agreements into tiny pieces.
Okay.
And RE is obviously the real estate. So if you're sort of scratching your head thinking, why
What's
on
the name?
earth did you come up with that stupid name? We think that sometime in the future it will have relevance. But QuantmRE, everything's there. Contact details. We have calculators where you can find out how much equity.
Mm.
We've got all of these wonderful podcasts and blogs and articles that are there, and all of our contact details are there if you want to reach out. And we would love to speak to you and find out how we can help you.
Absolutely amazing. Well, it's been such a pleasure, Matthew. Matthew Sullivan of QuantmRE. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Gabby, it was my pleasure. Thank you for having me on.